Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, Tarek, and boy do I have a treat today for you. Or maybe it is a treat for me, because you know full well anytime I can get any chance to talk about Daytona USA on the channel, I'm gonna run, not walk, to my microphone and start talking about Daytona USA like it's a game you've never discovered before, even though you played it a dozen times. That is because I am playing a new Daytona USA recomp based upon the Xbox Live version of the game by Segmentation Fault. And just so you know, I'm going to be right up front in the beginning of this video right now. If you want to play around with this one, you have to go through the full GitHub build process. That is because there isn't a built version in the releases tab. This is still in development, but damn it, you tell me Daytona USA, you tell me Recomp, and I am 100% there day one, and I'm going to have a hell of a fun time. And that's exactly what you're watching right now. You're watching a Daytona USA recompilation project. We're not playing this on Xbox 360. We're not playing it on the Model 2 emulator or MAME. It is recompiling the PowerPC code in real time and using RexGlue as the underpinnings. And as far as the performance here is concerned, the frame rate, the visuals, and everything else, it is absolutely stunning. And it's one of those things, if you love Daytona USA, a lot of times people point to this version of the game as being the best, and now the best is going to get even better. So honestly, that is just a straight up 10 out of 10 for me right at the top of the video, because you know full well Daytona USA and Sega racing games on Sega Model 2 is some of my favorite shit of all time when it comes to arcade games. Before I get too far involved though, do me a huge favor down below, hit like and subscribe and ring that notification bell, definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. And big thanks to Andy D for helping with some of the captures on this one. I sent him the Linux build from the developer. There's also a Windows build, but that is a little bit earlier on in the progress. But honestly, for something that is still being worked on, the performance here is just off the chart smooth, and that's what we want. I will say on the Xbox Live version of the game definitely is something that can be a little touchy on an analog control, but you get there for sure. But just take a look at the motion cadence of this footage, everything loading in and everything running smoothly. That's why I'm not doing any cuts here, so I can emphasize just how incredibly well this recomp is currently running. And it is fun to see something like a recomp for an Xbox Live arcade game, especially stuff that's been delisted, because honestly, if you want to go out and buy something like an Xbox 360 disc and pop it in your 360, you can do that any day of the week. But if you want to play an Xbox Live arcade game that might be a little bit harder to find, you can definitely do that, but it just takes a couple more hoops to jump through. So static recomps of some of these Xbox Live arcade games, especially the exclusive ones, I think that really is a fun future for the overall concept of recomps to take. When you give me a game like Daytona USA, I'm going to even have that much more fun. If you haven't noticed recently, we're seeing a lot more movement on the Xbox 360 recomp side of things with RexGlue. And if you haven't heard of it before, I'll give you another quick primer. Basically, the Xbox 360 uses a PowerPC architecture on the CPU, and that's completely different instruction set wise than anything that you're going to find in any modern piece of hardware right now. If you're on an ARM chip, if you're on Mac Silicate, if you're on x86, whether you're AMD or Intel, PowerPC is completely different. It was a big thing back in the day, but honestly, if anyone's watching this video on a PowerPC processor, I would be shocked. So what RexGlue does is in real time recompile all of the PowerPC code for the actual game logic and everything else underpinning how the game works into an instruction set that a modern CPU can understand. It's then borrowing Xenia's backend for the graphics and the audio to be able to actually draw an image, as well as give you the audio that you're going to hear in the game, which in this capture was a little bit off, so we're going to kind of skip over the soundtrack sample, but I'll do it in a very inventive and fun way. But again, this is running so well, and for something that is still early on in development, I am hyper impressed with just how smooth the entire experience can be. Because something like Daytona USA is a very famous and well-known game, so when you actually sit down and play a new version of it, if anything was off, you'd almost instantaneously be able to tell. And because this is one of my favorite arcade racing games of all time, it's something that I would immediately know with the visuals and the controls that something wasn't working the way it should. And I will say Segmentation Fault is doing an incredible job on this recomp, and they have other ones in development as well that you might be excited about, but you'll have to wait for those videos. But let's do the quote-unquote soundtrack sample, because again, there was a little bit of hitching audio. I think it was a capture issue, not an actual recomp issue. And I'll be right back to have some more Daytona USA recomp fun. But enjoy! Alright, I know I'm fucking around with you just a little bit there, but it's one of those things I figured it would be fun just for 10 seconds to get the chuckle out of you, and every once in a while OBS just likes to hitch on some audio because actually hearing the game audio come out of different sources, it really isn't having an issue, but again, it's so early in development, it could just be a single dependency on a machine. So if you do want to play this one, you can build it from the GitHub repo, and I will link that in the description below, but just be aware it is going to be a full manual build process right now. There is nothing under the releases tab, so you're going to have the entirety of the actual process as far as building is concerned ready to set up on your system. So if you've never built a GitHub project before, maybe something that you might want to wait around until it overall improves a slight bit and you actually have builds on the releases tab, because it's one of those things I would say 9 out of 10 people aren't going to build a Git repo whatsoever, and maybe the 1 out of 10 that are going to do it, 50% of them are going to end up with build errors, and that just is kind of the thing. There's so many different dependencies involved in projects, where you're actually building them from, what tool set you're using, that even if you have built a project before, sometimes you can still get a little bit tripped up. So again, if you want to play around with this one, you're going to do it not at your own risk, but at your own. It might take you an hour or two to be able to actually get the executable out of the build and play around with it. But from there, it is 10 out of 10 fun and definitely worth taking a look at. And as we go through this course here, if you take a look at all the polygons on the walls, all of the canyons, all of the textures, all of the pseudo reflections, which are obviously just textures going across the back of the actual car, it just looks, feels, and plays exactly like Daytona USA on Xbox Live Arcade and Xbox 360, except better because it is on a modern operating system. And because the 360 was the HD era, but it definitely was still a console that could be a little bit rough around the edges, getting these recomps is just going to make these games that much more fun and that much more playable, and that means it's going to win as far as everyone is concerned, because honestly I don't think Daytona is ever going to come back. I think Sega is basically done with the franchise. Sure, we got Daytona USA 3, which is basically a quasi remake and reimagining of the original Daytona, but since then Sega really hasn't mentioned the series whatsoever, and I really feel like Daytona is a dead franchise. Makes me really sad to say that, but I don't think Daytona USA 4 is ever coming out. I would love to be proven wrong, and a lot of times when I make emphatic statements like that, a week later I have to eat crow. So hopefully that crow's going to be served up with some steak sauce and a fork and a knife, because I want to be wrong about this one. I just don't really feel like I'm going to be wrong. But maybe in some alternate universe we're already playing Daytona USA 4, and hopefully it is every bit as good as something like the rest of the Daytona USA games are. But obviously recomps and PC ports and source ports are going to be all the rage for the rest of 2026, even moving on into the future, because I know 2027 seems like it's a long way away, but in the way time moves, especially when you get older, it'll probably be here in like 3 weeks, and you're going to be seeing hundreds upon hundreds of these RexGlue recomps. And just so you know, this is doing things differently than the Sonic Unleashed Recomp, which is dealing with all of the graphics and audio underlying it as well, and you may see more projects like that coming over to the 360, but honestly this does the job it needs to do, and if you can use Xenia, and if it even drives Xenia forward for a pure Xbox 360 software emulation experience, that means they're all going to win. But this time I'm going to give you the second soundtrack sample, and it is going to be audio from the game. No trickery this time, so go ahead and listen for 30 seconds or so, and I'll be right back and talk a little bit more how to build this one if you want to give it a shot. But enjoy. I mean, okay, you can't blame me for doing it twice, because I feel like you probably thought that that second soundtrack sample was actually going to be the soundtrack sample. And before somebody leaves a comment down below, sorry for wasting your time. We're watching retro gaming videos on YouTube. We're all wasting our time in all the most fun ways. So let me have a little fun now and then, and try not to complain about it too much, because we just had a full moon. But honestly, an Xbox 360 recomp project, not one that I had on my 2026 bingo card, but damn it, I'm going to yell bingo, because this one is a winner to me. And it really makes me think of all those other fun Xbox Live Arcade games that we could get recomps for that were exclusive to that service and never actually got a physical release. So leave me a comment down below and you tell me, of all the Xbox Live Arcade games, which one would you love to see a recomp for? I'm not going to answer that question because obviously you're seeing the footage for it right now. I have been since the 90s the biggest fan of Sega 3D arcade racing games. I own a lot of these things as original arcade PCBs in my closet, and I still play them to this day, and I still think they're some of the best racing games ever made. And considering Sega doesn't really make many arcade racing games anymore, getting something like a Daytona USA recomp is going to be a 10 out of 10 fun thing in my opinion. And because I love it so much, obviously I'm biased, but I think you guys love it about as much as I do. But short of that, we are done. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. If you do want to build this project, the link to the GitHub is in the description below. Just pay attention to all of the directions and all of the other contingencies you're going to have to deal with to get a successful build. And if you don't want to do that, you can just wait for the releases tab to finally have a build. You never know. But we've crashed, and I'll see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed the video. Bye-bye.